She was shaking when she said it, literally trembling, her hands gripping the edge of my couch so hard her knuckles went white. "My family buried me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They had a funeral, put a casket in the ground with my name on it, threw dirt on top while they cried. But I was alive the whole time. I've been a licensed therapist for 17 years now, worked with over 2,500 clients in my practice here in Boston, and I thought I'd heard everything. But this stopped me cold." She looked up at me with eyes that were simultaneously terrified and desperate. "I watched it happen," she continued. "I saw them bury me, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. Before we go any further, I need to make something absolutely clear. All names and identifying details in this story have been changed completely. This is a composite based on years of clinical experience, designed to protect client confidentiality. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. But I promise you, what I'm about to share with you is psychologically true, and it's going to get darker than you can possibly imagine. Her name, for our purposes, is Miranda. She was 42 years old when she first came to see me, though she'd been carrying this secret for almost a decade. 10 years of living with the knowledge that somewhere in a cemetery outside of Atlanta, there's a grave with her name on it. A headstone that reads Miranda Catherine Ross, beloved daughter and sister, 1981 to 2015. Except Miranda didn't die in 2015. She's sitting in my office right now, very much alive, trying to explain how this is even possible. If you want to hear how someone gets buried alive by their own family and survives to tell about it, hit subscribe right now, because this story goes places you won't believe. Miranda grew up in what looked like a perfect Southern family. Her father was a prominent lawyer in Atlanta. Her mother was on every charity board in the city, and her older brother Daniel was following in their father's footsteps at a prestigious law firm. Miranda was the younger daughter, the creative one, the one who never quite fit the mold. "I was always different," she told me. "I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to travel. I didn't want the junior league and the country club and the proper Southern wedding they'd planned for me since I was born." By the time she was 30, the pressure to conform had become suffocating. But here's where things get complicated. Miranda wasn't just rebelling against expectations. She was hiding something much bigger, something her family could never know. "I was in love with someone," she said, and the way she said it, I knew immediately this wasn't a simple romance. Her name was Sophie. We'd been together for 3 years in secret. Nobody knew. Nobody could know. In her family's world, in their social circle, being gay wasn't just unacceptable. It was unthinkable. Miranda had watched her father disown a colleague's son for coming out, had heard her mother say that homosexuality was a sin worse than murder. She knew what would happen if they found out, so she kept it secret. For 3 years, she lived a double life, dated men her family approved of, for show, while actually building a life with Sophie in a small apartment across town. "I was exhausted," Miranda told me, "constantly lying, constantly performing. I'd go to family dinners and listen to my mother talk about which eligible bachelor I should be pursuing. And then I'd go home to Sophie and cry because I couldn't tell them the truth. The stress of living this double life was destroying her. She started having panic attacks, couldn't sleep, lost weight. Her family noticed she was struggling, but they attributed it to her failure to settle down and her stubborn refusal to grow up. Then something happened that forced Miranda's hand. Sophie got offered a job in Portland, an amazing opportunity, the kind you don't turn down. And Sophie wanted Miranda to come with her. She wanted us to move across the country, start fresh where nobody knew us, build a real life together. Miranda explained, not hiding, not pretending, just being us. It was everything Miranda wanted, but it meant leaving her family behind, permanently, because she couldn't move to Portland and maintain the fiction that she was single and looking for a husband. Her family would demand explanations, want to visit, expect her to come home for holidays. The truth would eventually come out. Miranda made a decision. She was going to tell them. Come out, explain about Sophie, and accept whatever consequences came. She planned it carefully, rehearsed what she'd say, picked a Sunday dinner at her parents' house to make the announcement. Stick around and subscribe, because what she told me next is where this story takes a turn into absolute darkness. She gathered everyone in the living room after dinner. Her parents, her brother Daniel and his wife, her grandmother who lived with them. She stood in front of them and she said it. I'm gay. I've been in a relationship with a woman for 3 years. Her name is Sophie and I love her. We're moving to Portland together. The silence that followed was, in her words, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her mother started crying immediately, these dramatic sobs, like someone had died. Her father just stared at her, his face turning red, a vein pulsing in his temple. Her grandmother clutched her chest and had to sit down. And Daniel, her brother who she'd thought might understand, who'd always been the more progressive one, looked at her with something close to disgust. You're choosing this, he said. You're choosing to humiliate this family like this. Her father stood up. He was a tall man, imposing, used to commanding courtrooms and getting his way. You will not do this, he said, his voice cold and controlled. You will not destroy this family's reputation with your ... perversion. Miranda tried to explain, tried to make them understand, but he cut her off. You have 2 choices, Miranda. You end this relationship, you get into therapy to fix whatever is broken in you, and you never mention this again, or you are no longer my daughter. Her mother was hysterical by this point, talking about what the church would say, what their friends would think, how they could never show their faces again. Miranda stood her ground. I'm not broken, she said. I love Sophie. I'm moving to Portland. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but I can't live this lie anymore. Her father's face went from red to almost purple. Then you are dead to us, he said. As of this moment, you are not part of this family. You don't exist. Miranda told me she thought it was just anger talking, that he'd cool down eventually, that they'd come around. She was wrong, so wrong. She left that house and went to Sophie's apartment. They cried together, held each other, and started planning their move to Portland. But over the next week, something strange started happening. Miranda's phone, which usually rang constantly with family obligations and mother's check-ins and brother's requests, went completely silent. When she tried to call, her mother wouldn't answer. Her father had blocked her number. Daniel sent one text. You made your choice. Live with it. Her social media accounts were blocked by every family member. Her keys to her parents' house no longer worked when she tried to go over and talk to them. She'd been erased. I was devastated, Miranda said, but I was also relieved. I thought, okay, this is the price. I lose my family, but I get to be myself. That's the trade. She and Sophie moved to Portland 2 weeks later, started building their life. Miranda got a job at an art gallery. Sophie started her new position. They rented a beautiful apartment with huge windows overlooking the city. For the first time in her adult life, Miranda felt free. She could hold Sophie's hand in public, introduce her as her partner, be honest about who she was. It was everything she'd dreamed of. But before we get into what happened next, I need you to understand something crucial about family systems and disownment. When a family cuts someone out completely, especially in tight-knit communities like the one Miranda came from, they often need to create a narrative to explain the absence. They need a story that protects their reputation and justifies the cutting off. What happened next shows just how far a family will go to protect their image. 3 months after Miranda moved to Portland, she got a call from an old high school friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. I'm so sorry for your loss, the friend said. Miranda was confused. What loss? There was a long pause. Your family... They said you died. There was a funeral last week. Miranda felt the ground tilt under her feet. What are you talking about? The friend explained hesitantly that there had been an obituary in the Atlanta paper, that Miranda's parents had announced she'd died suddenly of a brain aneurysm. that there had been a memorial service at their church, that she'd been buried in the family plot at the cemetery. I saw the photos on Facebook. The friend said, "Your mum posted them, your grave, with your name on it." Miranda dropped the phone. She opened her laptop with shaking hands and searched, and there it was, her obituary. A photo of her from 5 years ago, smiling at some family event, the dates of her birth and death, a description of her as a beloved daughter who left us too soon, donations in her memory to be made to the family's church. If you're feeling what I felt when I first heard this, you need to understand the level of psychological devastation this creates. Have you ever been erased so completely that people think you're dead? Let me know in the comments, because Miranda's reaction to discovering her own grave is something I'll never forget. She called her parents' house from a friend's phone. Her mother answered. "Mum, it's me, it's Miranda." Her mother's voice went ice cold. "I don't know who this is, but my daughter is dead. Don't ever call this number again." And she hung up. Miranda tried calling Daniel. His wife answered. "Daniel doesn't have a sister," she said. "Please stop harassing us during our time of grief." Miranda told me she stood in her apartment, looking at her own obituary on the computer screen, and felt like she was losing her mind. "I couldn't comprehend it," she said. "They didn't just disown me, they killed me. They created a fake death, had a fake funeral, buried an empty casket, and convinced everyone I was dead." Sophie tried to help her process it, suggested maybe it was a misunderstanding, but Miranda knew better. This was deliberate, calculated. Her family would rather tell the world she was dead than admit she was gay. Over the next few weeks, Miranda discovered the full extent of what they'd done. They'd contacted all her old friends with the news, posted on social media, sent death announcements. People she'd known her whole life sent condolence cards to her parents. Her old college roommate wrote a tribute about her in the alumni magazine. A scholarship was established in her name at her high school. All of it based on a lie. All of it treating her like she was actually dead. The cruelest part, her family's friends and community believed it completely. Nobody questioned it. Nobody thought to verify. Why would they? Why would anyone fake their own daughter's death? But Miranda couldn't just ignore this. She couldn't let them erase her. She started making calls, trying to tell people the truth. "I'm alive," she'd say. "I'm not dead." They lied, but people didn't believe her. Or worse, they did believe her, and thought she was being cruel, some kind of imposter trying to scam a grieving family. One of her mother's friends called the police on her for harassment. Her father's law firm sent her a cease and desist letter, threatening legal action if she continued to impersonate a deceased person and distress the family. Now here's where it gets truly disturbing. Miranda decided to go back to Atlanta, to show up in person, to prove she was alive. She flew back, went to her parents' house, knocked on the door. Her brother Daniel answered, and when he saw her standing there, when he saw his supposedly dead sister alive on the doorstep, he didn't hug her or cry with relief or express shock. He looked at her calmly and said, "You need to leave. You're trespassing." Miranda pushed past him into the house. Her parents were in the living room. Her mother saw her and screamed, but it wasn't a scream of surprise or joy. It was a scream of horror and rage. Her father stood up, his face cold. "Get out of our house." Miranda was crying now, begging. "I'm your daughter. I'm alive. You buried an empty casket. Why? Why would you do this?" And her father said something that still makes my blood run cold. "You chose to die to us. We just made it official." Her mother added, voice shaking with fury, "You killed our daughter when you chose that lifestyle. The girl we raised doesn't exist anymore. She's dead. You're just a ghost wearing her face." Daniel called the police, reported an intruder. Miranda was escorted off the property. The officer who drove her away told her sympathetically that she needed to respect the family's grief and stop this impersonation. Even he didn't believe she was really Miranda Ross. She flew back to Portland in shock, and that's when the full psychological weight of what had happened crashed down on her. She wasn't just disowned. She'd been legally, socially, and emotionally erased. Her death certificate was filed. Her grave existed. Her obituary was in the public record. As far as the world was concerned, Miranda Catherine Ross died in 2015. The woman living in Portland under that name was technically committing identity fraud, using a dead person's social security number, existing illegally. I couldn't function, Miranda told me. I'd wake up and think, am I real? Am I actually alive? How can I be dead and alive at the same time? She developed severe dissociation, would sometimes stand in front of mirrors and not recognize herself. Sophie tried to support her, but the strain was too much. They broke up after a year. Sophie said she couldn't compete with the ghost of Miranda's family, couldn't help someone who didn't know if she existed. Miranda spiraled, started drinking heavily, lost her job, ended up in a psychiatric hospital after a breakdown where she'd gone to a government office and demanded they prove she was alive, screaming that she had a grave, but she wasn't in it. That's when she was referred to me, 3 years after discovering her own grave, 3 years of trying to exist as a dead woman. And now, sitting in my office, she asked me the question that haunts me to this day. How do I come back to life when everyone thinks I'm dead? And more importantly, do I even want to? The first thing I did was help Miranda understand that her question wasn't really about whether she wanted to come back to life. It was about whether she could accept that the person she used to be was actually dead. The Miranda her family knew, the one who performed perfection and hid her truth, that woman did die. The question was whether the woman sitting in front of me could build a life without needing their validation or acknowledgement. But before we could work on that, Miranda needed to know something concrete. She needed to understand how her family had legally pulled this off. We started investigating. Miranda hired a lawyer in Atlanta, someone with no connection to her father's firm or social circle. What they discovered was both ingenious and horrifying. Her father, being a prominent attorney, knew exactly how to exploit gaps in the system. He'd filed a death certificate claiming Miranda had died while traveling alone in a remote area of North Georgia. No body recovered due to drowning in a river during a flash flood. He had a coroner from a small rural county sign off on it, likely someone who owed him a favor or didn't ask too many questions. The death was registered as accidental, body presumed lost. The system is built on trust, Miranda's lawyer explained to her. When a respected attorney files paperwork saying his daughter died, especially with what appears to be proper documentation, nobody questions it. There's no verification process for deaths without recovered bodies. It happens more often than you'd think. Miranda felt sick listening to this. Her father had used his legal expertise, his reputation, his connections, to literally erase her from existence, and it was completely legal. Technically, she could challenge it in court, prove she was alive, have the death certificate reversed. But here's the catch. If she did that, her father could be charged with filing false documents, fraud, maybe even identity theft. Her entire family could face legal consequences. If you're hooked, subscribe because I have hundreds of these stories, and what Miranda decided to do next will shock you. She sat in that lawyer's office with the power to destroy her family's life the way they'd destroyed hers. One court filing and her father would lose his law license, possibly face prison time. Her mother's social standing would collapse. Daniel's career would be tainted by association. She could make them pay for what they'd done. Do it. Sophie had urged her before they broke up. Take them down. They deserve it. But Miranda couldn't decide. Here's what nobody tells you about revenge, she said to me in one of our sessions. It requires you to keep engaging with the people who hurt you. I'd have to go back to Atlanta, sit in courtrooms, face them, relive all of this publicly. And for what? To prove I'm alive to people who don't want me to be. To punish them when they've already shown me they'll never change. She had a point. The question wasn't whether she could hurt them back. It was whether doing so would actually heal anything inside her. But then, something happened that forced her hand. Miranda had been living in Portland under her legal name, Miranda Ross. Even though technically she was using a dead person's identity, she'd been careful, kept a low profile, worked cash jobs, but she needed to renew her driver's license. When she went to the DMV, her information flagged in the system. Her social security number was marked as deceased. The clerk looked at her with confusion and suspicion. "Ma'am, according to our records, you died in 2015. I can't issue a license to a deceased person." Miranda tried to explain, but it sounded insane. "That's a mistake. I'm alive." Obviously, the clerk called a supervisor. The supervisor called the police. Miranda spent 4 hours being questioned about identity fraud. They thought she was some kind of con artist using a dead woman's information. She had to show them her original birth certificate, old photos, anything to prove she was really Miranda Ross. Finally, a detective ran her fingerprints and confirmed she was who she said she was. But then came the harder question. How are you alive if you have a death certificate? Miranda told them the truth. Her family had falsified her death. The detective's face went from confused to concerned. "Ma'am, that's a serious crime. We need to investigate this." Miranda panicked. "No, please. I don't want to press charges. I just want to exist." But it was too late. Once the police knew about a potential fraud, they had to investigate. Within a week, detectives in Atlanta were looking into how Miranda Ross had a death certificate when she was clearly alive in Oregon. Her father was questioned. Her mother was questioned. Daniel was brought in. And their response? They claimed Miranda was lying, that the woman in Oregon was an imposter, that their real daughter had died and this was some kind of sick scam. They had photos from the funeral, testimonials from hundreds of people who'd attended, a grave with a body in it. Wait, a body. Miranda's lawyer called her with a question that made her blood run cold. "Miranda, if they buried a casket with your name on it, what's actually in that casket?" She'd assumed it was empty, but what if it wasn't? What if there was actually something, or someone, buried under her name? The lawyer petitioned the court for an exhumation order. If they could prove the grave was empty or contained something other than Miranda's body, it would expose the fraud. But if there was a body, whose body was it? Before I tell you the worst part, hit that subscribe button, because what they found in that grave changed everything we thought we understood about this case. The exhumation took weeks to approve. Miranda's family fought it viciously, claimed it was desecrating their daughter's resting place, that it was cruel and unnecessary. But the judge sided with the investigation. If a woman was claiming to be alive while having a death certificate and a grave with her name on it, the truth needed to be established. The day of the exhumation, Miranda flew back to Atlanta. She stood at a distance, behind police barriers, watching as workers dug up the grave that bore her name. The casket was brought up, sealed. When they opened it, here's what they found. Clothing, Miranda's clothing, pieces she'd left behind when she moved to Portland. Her high school yearbook, photos of her as a child, a teddy bear she'd had since she was 6, and tucked in the middle of it all, a letter, in her mother's handwriting. The letter was addressed to Miranda, but it was never meant for her to read. It was meant for God. A prayer, essentially. "Dear Lord, please forgive us for what we had to do. Our daughter chose sin over family. We couldn't let her destroy everything we've built. By burying her this way, we give her soul a chance at redemption. Let her be remembered as she was, not as what she became. Let our community remember a good daughter, not a sinner. Amen." The police were baffled. There was no body, so technically no crime of filing a false death certificate, just the administrative fraud. But the psychological cruelty of what they'd done, creating an entire grave as a shrine to the daughter they wished they still had, that was something else entirely. The prosecutor wanted to charge them with fraud and conspiracy. But here's where it got complicated. Miranda's family had powerful connections. Her father's law firm had deep ties to the district attorney's office. Suddenly, the investigation stalled. Witnesses became unavailable. Documents went missing. The prosecutor told Miranda's lawyer, "Off the record, I'm being pressured to drop this. They have too much influence." Miranda sat in my office, processing this new layer of betrayal. "They buried my clothes," she said, her voice hollow. "They put my things in a casket and mourned them like I was in there. My mother wrote me a prayer asking God to erase who I really am. I asked her what felt worse, the original disownment or this discovery. She thought about it for a long time. The disownment I could understand in a twisted way. They were raised to believe being gay was wrong. They were products of their environment. But this, creating a grave, performing grief, writing that prayer, that's calculated. That's them choosing, day after day, to maintain the lie. To look at my gravestone and feel nothing about the fact that I'm alive somewhere. That's not just rejection, that's erasure. Would you be able to forgive something like this? If your family literally buried a version of you to protect their reputation, could you move past it? Comment below, because Miranda's next decision surprised even me. She told her lawyer to drop the case, to stop pursuing charges, to let it go. When I asked why, she said something profound. "Because I finally understand that I can't force them to see me. I spent 30 years trying to be the daughter they wanted. I spent 3 years trying to make them accept who I really am. And now I was about to spend more years trying to make them pay for not accepting me. I'm done. They can keep their grave and their lie. I'm keeping my life." But the prosecutor wouldn't let it go that easily. Even without Miranda's cooperation, there was enough evidence of fraud to proceed. The case became public. News outlets picked up the story. Prominent Atlanta lawyer accused of faking daughter's death after she came out. It went viral. Miranda's face, the one from her fake obituary, was suddenly everywhere. Her parents' social standing, the thing they'd sacrificed her to protect, crumbled overnight. Their church asked them to step down from leadership positions. Her father's law firm forced him into early retirement. Her mother's charity boards quietly removed her. And Daniel, her brother who'd helped maintain the lie, lost a major client who didn't want to be associated with the scandal. Miranda watched it all unfold from Portland. People she hadn't spoken to in years reached out to her, apologizing for believing she was dead, expressing horror at what her family had done. Old friends wanted to reconnect. Her college ex-boyfriend sent a long email about how brave she was. But here's what's psychologically fascinating. Miranda felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. "I thought I'd feel something when they lost everything," she told me. "I thought I'd feel like justice was served. But I just feel tired, because none of this gives me back the years I lost. None of this makes them love me." The media wanted interviews. Book publishers reached out. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell her story. Miranda declined everything. She didn't want to be the gay woman whose family buried her. She didn't want that to be her identity. "I just want to be Miranda," she said. "Not dead Miranda. Not resurrected Miranda. Not brave Miranda or victim Miranda. Just Miranda." But the world wasn't going to let her be just Miranda. She'd become a symbol for LGBTQ+ people dealing with family rejection, for anyone who'd been erased or disowned. Her story was too powerful to ignore. And then, 6 months after the exhumation, Miranda got a call that changed everything again. It was from a woman who'd seen the news coverage, a woman who said she needed to talk to Miranda about her family, about what really happened, about secrets that went deeper than anyone knew. The woman's name was Alina, and she claimed to be Miranda's father's former secretary. What she told Miranda made everything that had happened before seem almost simple by comparison. Alina met Miranda at a quiet coffee shop in downtown Portland, far from anyone who might recognize either of them. She was in her 60s, grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing clothes that looked expensive but understated. When she sat down across from Miranda, the first thing she said was, "I'm sorry, I should have come forward years ago." Miranda studied her face, trying to remember if she'd ever met this woman during her childhood visits to her father's office. "You worked for my father for how long?" Miranda asked. Elena's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. 23 years. I started when he was just building his practice. I knew everything about that firm, about your family, including things I wish I didn't know. What Elena revealed over the next 2 hours shattered what remained of Miranda's understanding of her family. Your father didn't just bury you to protect the family reputation, Elena said carefully. He did it to protect himself. From you. Miranda felt her chest tighten. What are you talking about? Elena pulled out a folder, old and worn, stuffed with documents. Your father's law practice wasn't as clean as it appeared. I handled his books, his files, his correspondence. Over the years, I noticed discrepancies. Money moving in ways it shouldn't. Clients being billed for work that was never done. Settlement funds that disappeared. He was embezzling, Miranda. Had been for over a decade. Miranda's mind reeled. How much? Elena's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Millions. Over the course of 15 years. Probably close to $8 million. He had offshore accounts, shell companies, the whole setup. I kept records because I was terrified that someday it would all come out and I'd be blamed as his secretary. She pushed the folder across the table. This is everything. Copies of transfers, falsified documents, emails, proof. But here's where it gets darker. 2 weeks before you came out to your family, Elena continued, you called your father's office. Do you remember? You wanted to talk to him about something, but he wasn't there, so you talked to me. Miranda did remember. She'd been nervous about coming out, wanted advice, and in a moment of weakness, she'd called and ended up venting to Elena about feeling trapped in her life. I told you I was thinking about making a big change, Miranda said slowly, about finally being honest about who I was. Elena nodded. And I mentioned it to your father, just casually. Said you'd called, seemed stressed, talked about making big changes and being honest. I didn't think anything of it. Elena's eyes filled with tears. But your father did. He thought you'd found out about his embezzling. That's what he heard when I said you wanted to be honest. He thought you were going to expose him. Miranda felt like the floor was falling away beneath her. So when I came out, ... double quotes, Elena finished the sentence. He saw an opportunity. You'd given him the perfect reason to cut you off completely, to bury you, literally, so that if you ever did try to expose his crimes, nobody would believe the disgraced gay daughter who'd been disowned and buried. You'd look crazy, vindictive, making up lies about the grieving father who'd lost his beloved daughter. Miranda sat in stunned silence. Her father hadn't buried her because she was gay, or not just because of that. He'd buried her because he thought she was a threat to his criminal empire. The homophobia was real, the religious outrage was real, but underneath it all was cold calculation. By making her dead, he'd neutralized any future threat she might pose. Does my mother know? Miranda asked. Elena shook her head. I don't think so. Your mother believed she was protecting the family name from scandal. Your brother too. They thought they were doing the right thing in their twisted way. But your father, he was protecting himself. If you were in my position as Miranda's therapist, what would you tell her to do with this information? Would you encourage her to expose him, even knowing it might destroy what's left of her family? Tell me in the comments, because what Miranda did next surprised even me. She took Elena's folder home, spent days going through every document, every piece of evidence. It was all there. Incontrovertible proof that her father had stolen millions from clients, many of them elderly people who'd trusted him with their life savings. She could take this to the authorities. Her father would go to prison. The family would lose everything. Justice, finally, would be served. But Miranda called me before making any decision. I keep thinking about what this would do, she said in our session. Not to my father. He deserves whatever he gets. But to the clients he stole from. Some of them are probably dead now. Their families might get restitution, but it won't bring back the security he took from them. And my mother, my brother, they're guilty of burying me, but they didn't know about the embezzling. They'd lose their homes, their savings, everything, because of crimes they didn't commit. This is the psychological complexity that fascinates me about trauma and justice. Miranda had every right to burn it all down, but doing so meant creating more victims. She made an unusual choice. She contacted the Georgia State Bar anonymously, provided just enough information to trigger an audit of her father's practice without revealing the full extent of what she knew. Within weeks, investigators descended on his firm. They found enough irregularities to start building a case. Her father, feeling the walls closing in, made a deal. He'd return what money was left, about $2 million, to affected clients in exchange for avoiding prison. He lost his law license permanently, had to sell everything to make restitution. The prestigious family fell from grace, but not catastrophically, not criminally. Miranda watched this unfold from across the country, anonymous and invisible. Her father never knew it was her who'd started the investigation. Nobody did, except Alina and me. I wanted him to pay, Miranda told me, but I didn't want to be the one wielding the sword. I didn't want him to have that power over me anymore, the power to make me into his destroyer. So I let the system handle it, imperfectly, incompletely, but without me having to engage. There's profound psychological wisdom in that choice. She'd found a way to seek justice without letting it consume her. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months after her father's law firm collapsed, Miranda received a letter, hand-delivered to her apartment in Portland by a courier. The return address was her mother's. Miranda almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity, or maybe hope, made her break the seal. Inside was a single page, handwritten in her mother's elegant script. Miranda, if you're reading this, you're alive. I don't know where you are or who you've become, but I know my daughter isn't in that grave. I think I've always known. What we did was unforgivable. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that every day for the past 4 years, I've gone to your grave and talked to you, told you about my day, asked for your forgiveness, begged God to let you be at peace. And now I know you're not there. You never were. I buried my own daughter to save my reputation, and I lost both. I'm writing this because your father is sick. Cancer. The doctors say he has maybe 6 months. I don't know if you care. I don't know if you should care, but I thought you had a right to know. I won't contact you again. I don't have that right. But if you ever want to come home, the door is open. Your mother. Miranda brought this letter to our next session. Her hands were shaking as she read it aloud. She knew, Miranda said when she finished. All this time, she knew the casket was empty. She'd been talking to my clothes and my teddy bear, knowing I wasn't there. The psychological torment of that, for both of them, was staggering. What do I do? Miranda asked me. Do I go see him? The man who buried me alive, who stole millions, who destroyed so many lives, including mine. Before I could answer, she continued, because part of me wants to walk into his hospital room and say, I'm alive, and you're dying, and I won. But another part of me just wants to let him die, never knowing what happened to me. Let him wonder for eternity if I exposed him or if karma just caught up. This raises a question that keeps me awake. Is it more powerful to confront the person who destroyed you, or to let them die without that closure? What serves healing better, presence or absence? I genuinely don't know. What would you do? Miranda struggled with this decision for weeks. Her father's health declined rapidly. The cancer was aggressive, merciless. She could get on a plane, be there in hours, look him in the eye one last time. Or she could let him go into death the same way he'd put her into social death, without warning, without goodbye, without resolution. She chose something in between. Miranda wrote a letter, but she never sent it. She wrote everything she wanted to say to her father. Pages and pages of rage and pain and grief and even, surprisingly, forgiveness. Not forgiveness that excused what he'd done, but forgiveness that released her from the need to carry his crimes alongside her own trauma. She wrote it all out, and then she burned it in her fireplace, watching the pages curl and blacken and turn to ash. "That's my closure," she told me, not giving it to him, giving it to myself. Her father died 2 weeks later. Miranda didn't attend the funeral, didn't send flowers, didn't acknowledge his death in any way, but something shifted in her after he was gone. The man who'd buried her was now actually buried. There was a symmetry to it that felt, if not just, then at least complete. Her mother sent one more letter after the funeral, shorter this time. "He asked for you at the end, called your name. I didn't tell him you were alive. I don't know if that was mercy or cruelty. I hope it was mercy. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. I hope you found the life you wanted, the one we couldn't let you have. Goodbye, Miranda." Miranda put that letter in a box with the first one, along with the photo from her fake obituary, a copy of her death certificate, and a picture of her gravestone that someone had posted online. Physical artifacts of her death that she'd survived. "I'm keeping them," she explained to me, "not to torture myself, but to remember that I died and came back, that I'm stronger than their worst cruelty, that I survived being buried alive. There's something powerful in that She wasn't a victim of her family's erasure. She was a survivor of it. But then, just when Miranda was starting to build something like peace, something happened that proved the past is never really past. Her brother Daniel showed up in Portland, unannounced. He'd tracked her down somehow, maybe through Alina, maybe through the investigation into their father's firm. He knocked on her apartment door on a Tuesday evening. When Miranda opened it and saw him standing there, she nearly slammed it in his face. "Please," Daniel said quickly, holding up his hands. "I just need 5 minutes. Then I'll leave and never contact you again." Against her better judgment, Miranda let him in. They sat in her living room, this brother and sister who'd buried and mourned each other, and Daniel said something that changed everything one more time. "I need to tell you something about the funeral," he began, his voice shaking. "About what's actually in your grave. Mom's letter said the casket had your clothes and belongings, and that's true. But there's something else, something nobody knows except me." He paused, his eyes filling with tears. "There's money in there, $200,000 in cash. I put it there." Miranda stared at her brother like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You put what in my grave?" Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. $200,000 in cash, wrapped in waterproof bags and hidden under your clothes in the casket. "I've been waiting for years for you to come dig it up, to give you some sign that you knew, but you never did. I thought maybe you really were dead somehow, that I'd imagined seeing you leave for Portland. I thought I was losing my mind." The room felt like it was spinning. Miranda gripped the arm of her couch. "Why would you do that?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Because I knew what Dad was doing. Not the embezzling. I didn't know about that until the investigation. But I knew he was burying you to silence you. I heard him on the phone with someone the night after you came out, talking about making sure you could never come back and damage the family. I didn't understand what he meant then, but when he started planning your fake funeral, I realized he was erasing you, and you went along with it," Miranda said, her voice cold. "You called the police on me. You told your wife you didn't have a sister." Daniel nodded, shame written across his face. "I was a coward. I was terrified of Dad, of losing my place in the firm, of being cut off like you were. So I played along, but I couldn't just do nothing. I took money from my savings, money Dad didn't know about, and I put it in your casket. It was my way of saying I'm sorry, of giving you something if you ever came back. I thought you'd know somehow, that you'd come dig it up." Miranda's mind was reeling. All these years, there had been $200,000 sitting in a grave with her name on it. Money that could have changed everything when she was spiraling, when she was broke and broken and trying to rebuild from nothing. "I didn't know," she said quietly. I thought it was empty, except for my things. I never imagined, ... Double quotes. Daniel leaned forward. I know it doesn't make up for what we did. Nothing can make up for that. But it's yours. It was always meant to be yours. I can help you get it out, quietly. We can exhume it again. Claim we're moving the family plot or something. Before I tell you what Miranda decided, I want you to think about this. If someone participated in your erasure but secretly tried to help you, does that absolve them? Can a hidden good deed cancel out a public betrayal? Comment below, because Miranda's response to Daniel taught me something profound about forgiveness and its limits. She looked at her brother, this man who'd helped bury her alive, but also tried to give her a lifeline, and she said, keep it. Daniel looked stunned. What? Miranda's voice was steady now, clearer than it had been since he arrived. Keep the money. I don't want it. If you feel guilty, donate it to an LGBTQ youth organization. Help kids who are being rejected by their families. But I don't want anything that came from that grave. I don't want anything connected to the family that buried me. Daniel started to protest, but Miranda held up her hand. You want to know why? Because taking that money would mean accepting that what you did was somehow balanced out by putting cash in my casket. It wasn't. You buried me, Daniel. You looked me in the eye and told me I was trespassing in my own family's home. You let me be erased. I know, Daniel whispered. I know I did. And I've hated myself every day since. Miranda softened slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. Then live with that. Don't try to pay me off for your guilt. If you want to make amends, do it by being the person who stands up next time. When someone else in your life is being erased or rejected or buried alive, you speak up. You don't play along and leave money in the coffin. You stop the funeral from happening. Daniel left her apartment that night, and Miranda never saw him again. She heard later that he did donate the money anonymously to a support organization for homeless LGBTQ+ youth. She heard he divorced his wife who'd been complicit in the lie, that he moved away from Atlanta, started over somewhere else. Maybe he found redemption. Maybe he's still looking for it. Miranda doesn't know and has chosen not to find out. Some doors, she told me in one of our final sessions, need to stay closed. Not locked, just closed. But here's what happened next that surprised both of us. About a year after Daniel's visit, Miranda met someone. A woman named Claire who knew nothing about Miranda's past, about the grave or the family or any of it. They met at an art gallery where Miranda had started working again, fell into easy conversation, started dating. For the first time since Sophie, Miranda allowed herself to be fully seen. And when the relationship got serious, Miranda knew she had to tell Claire everything. I need you to know who I am, Miranda said one night over dinner. Not just who I am now, but what happened to me. She told Claire the whole story, expected horror or disbelief, or for Claire to run. But Claire just listened, held Miranda's hand across the table, and when Miranda finished, Claire said something that made Miranda cry. You're not the girl in that grave. You're not even the woman who survived being buried. You're the woman sitting here with me right now, who makes me laugh, who sees beauty in broken things, who rebuilt herself from ashes. That's who you are. It was the first time since her family erased her that someone had seen Miranda as a complete person, not as her trauma. They're still together now. Miranda and Claire got married last year in a small ceremony in Portland, surrounded by friends they'd built into a chosen family. No one from Miranda's biological family was invited or even knew it happened. Miranda's mother is still alive, living in a smaller house in Atlanta, probably still visiting that grave and talking to an empty casket. Her brother Daniel is somewhere trying to atone for sins that can't be fully atoned for. And Miranda is in Portland, living a life her family tried to bury, refusing to be a ghost anymore. But if you think this story has a neat ending, you're wrong, because trauma doesn't resolve cleanly. Miranda still has moments where she dissociates, where she looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize herself. She still has nightmares about being buried alive, about suffocating in darkness. She still struggles with the question of whether she's real, whether she exists, whether the woman she is now is authentic or just another performance. Some days, she told me in our last session, I still feel dead, like I'm haunting my own life. And that's the truth about surviving something like this. You don't get over it. You don't heal completely. You just learn to live with the ghost of who you used to be, with the knowledge that somewhere there's a grave with your name on it, with the understanding that the people who were supposed to love you chose reputation over your existence. You carry that forever. It changes the shape of you. But here's what I've learned from Miranda. Carrying trauma doesn't mean you can't also carry joy. The weight of what happened to her doesn't prevent her from loving Claire, from creating art, from building a life that's real and full and hers. If this story affected you, subscribe for more. There are secrets you haven't heard yet, and stories that will challenge everything you think you know about family and survival and what it means to come back from the dead. Miranda's case taught me something crucial about the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. Her family showed her the worst of what people can do to each other, but she showed me the best of what people can become despite that. The last time I saw Miranda was 6 months ago. She came in for what she called a checkup session, just to update me on her life. She looked different, lighter somehow, like she was finally inhabiting her body fully, instead of hovering slightly outside of it. I've been thinking about the grave, she said, about the fact that it's still there. My name, my dates, my epitaph, and I've decided I'm okay with it. I asked her what she meant. She smiled, and it was genuine. Let it stand as a monument to the girl they tried to bury. Let people visit it and think about that Miranda, the one who couldn't be herself, because that girl did die. She had to die so that I could live. There's something profound in that reframing. The grave isn't a lie anymore. It's a marker of transformation. The old Miranda, the one who hid and performed and suffocated under expectations, she is dead. And the woman who emerged, who survived her own burial, who built a life from nothing, she's alive in ways the old Miranda never was. I'm not haunting my life anymore, she told me. I'm living it. Finally, actually living it. But then she said something that stayed with me, something that still keeps me up at night. There's just one thing I wonder about sometimes, she said, her voice thoughtful. My mother still visits that grave, still talks to it, and part of me wants to show up there one day, just stand behind her while she's talking to my headstone, and say, I'm here. I've been here all along, but I don't know if that would be kindness or cruelty. Would it free her from her grief, or would it destroy her? Would it be healing for either of us, or would it just reopen wounds that have finally started to scar over? I didn't have an answer for her then, and I don't have one now. Is there ever a right time to return from the dead? Is there ever a way to resurrect yourself that doesn't hurt everyone involved, including yourself? These are questions that don't have clean answers. Miranda has chosen to stay away, to let her mother keep her grief and her grave visits, to remain dead to the family that buried her. But she also knows that choice isn't permanent, that any day she could change her mind. She could show up at that cemetery. She could reveal herself. The power is hers now, not theirs. And maybe that's what survival looks like. Not resolution, not closure, not even healing. Just the power to choose. The power to decide whether you stay buried or rise up. The power to determine for yourself what it means to be alive. Miranda chose life, not the life her family wanted for her, not the life she thought she was supposed to have, but the life she's actually living, with all its complications and contradictions and moments of feeling like a ghost. She's alive, genuinely, messily, imperfectly alive. That's where we ended our therapeutic relationship, with Miranda walking out of my office into a life that's hers, carrying a past that tried to bury her but failed. I think about her sometimes, wonder if she ever did go to that cemetery, wonder if her mother ever found out she's alive, wonder if the weight of that grave gets lighter or heavier as time passes. But mostly, I think about what her story teaches us. That you can survive being buried alive by your own family. That you can be legally dead and still build a life. That the people who are supposed to love you can fail you catastrophically, and you can still find love elsewhere. That graves don't always hold bodies. Sometimes they just hold the versions of ourselves we had to kill to survive. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let people think you're dead, rather than trying to prove you're alive to those who refuse to see you. Miranda's family chose to bury her. She chose to stay buried to them. But she rose for herself, for Claire, for the life she deserved. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. Miranda isn't in that grave. She never was. She's alive, and she's free, and the family that tried to erase her will never know what she became. They buried a daughter, but what emerged was something they could never have imagined. A survivor, a woman who knows exactly what she's made of, because she's had to rebuild herself from nothing. Before you go, I want to leave you with the question Miranda left me with. If you could be reborn, but it meant everyone from your past thought you were dead, would you do it? Would you trade acknowledgement for authenticity, recognition for freedom? Sometimes the price of being yourself is letting other people's version of you die. And as Miranda proved, that death can be the beginning of the truest life you'll ever live. If you made it this far, thank you for bearing witness to Miranda's story. These sessions, these confessions, they're not just entertainment. They're testaments to human resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Subscribe if you want to hear more. But I'll warn you, not every story ends with the person surviving. Some people stay buried. Some people never escape their graves. Miranda did. And her story, as dark and complicated as it is ultimately one of hope. Broken, complicated hope, but hope nonetheless. And that confession about the money in the grave, that's not even the strangest thing I've heard about what families bury. But that's a story for another time.